research office. So finally, because I had written that book, because I approached it from an integral, consistent, political, philosophical, that this man has a worldview,
Yes,
you know what I mean?
right on.
It's not just on the spot,
No.
you know. And that I mentioned tonight over dinner that the Canadian Bill of the Canadian Charter, which he introduced in 1981, in 1967, the bicentennial, or the centennial year,
Yeah, that's right.
he gave a speech to the Canadian Legal Society, or the Canadian Lawyers Association.
Yes.
67. That's when he had just been appointed Minister of Justice. You remember under
Yes, that's right.
He gave that speech, and the Charter of Rights, or whatever the full title is exactly what's in that speech. So in other words, that shows the brilliance of the man, that in one short speech, he can already envision what he wants to put in law in 81. That's how brilliant or devious or...
Devious, I like that better.
Yeah.
Oh my.
So, you know, you remember George Grant wrote a book, Lament for a Nation. And my lament for Canada has ever been since 76 or 67, 77. Yeah. I had good years. I was very privileged. I was, you know, you were hired by one member of parliament who paid then the salary through the parliamentary office. But he permitted me to work with about 5 or 10 different conservative and Christian members of parliament.
Oh, yeah.
So I had free reign.
You know Walter Dinsdale?
Oh, yeah.
And I love that man, yeah.
Well, yeah, okay.
Yes.
Who else,
Yes.
dear?
Salvation Army man, correct? You were Salvation Army.
Yes,
Yes.
from Manitoba.
Yes. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. Well, World War II, he was very active in World War II. I think
That's
was,
right.
that was maybe one reason. And of course also because he was a Christian. I had known him. He was in the Diefenbaker government, you remember?
Yes.
So yeah, I've met several times with him.
Who else did you
Was
work?
it?
Who else did you work with?
Well, of course, then Diefenbaker himself. There was an old timer from BC, but he was social credit. He was an evangelical Christian also. I've forgotten his name. No.
Was Robert Thompson retired by then?
Well, you give me the dates of Robert Thompson. I was there from what, 77, 76, 77 to 83. So I think he was already retired.
He might have come out to Trinity.
Yeah. In that sense, you know, Robert Thompson may not have been the most astute political maneuver, because he was outmaneuvered, by Pearson, when they called the election or whatever. However, he was a genuine statesman who believed for the well-being of the nation,
So fun.
and in many respects very profound.
Oh yes, very. And anyway, Pearson and Trudeau ran the government separate from the members of parliament.
Yes, absolutely.
So they had their own men in office,
Yes.
in their own office, making things up and
Yes.
putting them through.
I give you a good illustration of that one.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, that's
Yes. Yes.
when Pearson resigned, the Department of External Affairs realized, of course, that, well, we're going to have a new prime minister. So we better do an examination of our foreign policy, international foreign policy.
Yeah.
So they did. They had a 2-year study of Canadian foreign policy. And the reports are there. Okay, they've been published, but the reports.
Right.
Trudeau had his own man, Ivan Head. Ivan Head was an intellectual from Edmonton
Oh, he had
or Calgary.
70s. No,
He
50s,
and Ivan Head wrote their own
Yes.
Canadian foreign policy.
right, yeah.
Or actually it was called, interesting, not a Canadian foreign policy, but a foreign policy for Canadians. It was a new
Right.
policy,
That's
not
exactly
a Canadian.
how he would talk. Yes.
Diefenbaker
Right.
and even the liberal leader from 1948, Laurier? No, who was it?
No.
Saint Laurent.
Saint
Oh,
Laurent.
yeah.
Yeah, right.
Right.
They had a liberal Canadian foreign policy. As a matter of fact, Saint Laurent, in his famous foreign policy speech of 47,
Right.
we want to defend Christian civilization.
Oh.
Think about that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, very good.
If you were to say that today, you would
Yeah.
be considered what? Intolerant or whatever.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
So
Worse.
the External Affairs had written the foreign policy examination to make some new proposals. Trudeau and Ivan had developed their own and completely dismissed the foreign policy of the
Yeah.
External Affairs
Yeah.
and
Oh.
imposed their own.
Really?
Yes.
That's how intellectually arrogant, determined, you
Yes.
name it,
Determined
he
is
was.
probably a good word.
That's how they
Yeah.
operated all the
Yes.
time.
Yeah.
Well, I always liked what you said about principles, that Trudeau was extremely principled.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We might not agree with his principles,
Yes.
but he was very principled,
Yes.
and he acted out his principles.
Yeah.
He was
There was had a very
consistent. We don't agree at all with his
consistent
principles.
And vision and a mission.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people criticized it, but it would, personality attacks on him, whatever. But I always told my members of parliament and others who ever listened, no, the man knows what he's doing.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
And the reason is because he has a very
But it was
clear,
definitely-
consistent,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
and he had
Oh, my.
he had the ability of being an intellectual and also very practical.
Mhm.
Because he was not a politician. He couldn't care less about parliamentarians.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Because he,
They got in his way.
well, that's right,
Oh,
yeah.
he
And he wrote as much. He
Was
wrote,
arrogant.
That Parliament, these are just talking bodies, They don't,
Yeah,
want, they,
right.
don't, they don't want the hell of beans.
he just dismissed it
Yeah.
all. Yeah. He
So,
just dismissed it.
I didn't mean to give you a sermon tonight.
What-
or a sermon.
I love it. I love
So,
it.
as an advisor to these members of parliament, then you were observing
Yes,
Trudeau.
yes.
And what led you to write this book?
Well,
That made you
very
think-
good because I was teaching already in America and then in New Brunswick.
Mhm.
We tried to start a Christian university.
St.
And
Stephen's.
that didn't get off the ground. And so they had to let me go. And I was determined not to be depressed.
Mhm.
I was going to use my time well.
Mhm.
And I already have been teaching about Trudeau, but come to a deeper understanding.
Mhm.
So during that year of unemployment, I was determined, as I said, to remain active and I decided to write on Trudeau. So read him over and over again. And then I outlined it basically by topics, Quebec, his views on Quebec,
Mhm.
his views on Parliament,
Mhm.
his views on the economy, his views on world affairs.
Right.
And then I'll give you one illustration. The book really helped a lot of people who were wondering about him. But there was one liberal advisor to John Turner.
Yeah.
Sharp?
I've
Is it Sharp or something?
forgotten his name right now. Earlier this over dinner I had. Anyway, he was disillusioned, with Trudeau, not John Turner not getting, the leadership position.
Oh, yes.
And later on, of
Right.
course, he did.
There was that.
So he left the Liberal Party and joined Joe Clark as the chief policy advisor.
Mhm.
And somebody must have told him, hey, there's this Phil Bohm around Parliament Hill on the fourth floor. He's written a book on Trudeau. Maybe you should read that, whatever.
Yeah.
So he came in the office about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And he said, "Are you Phil Bohm? Or where's Phil Bohm? Where are you?" He said, "I want a copy of the book."
Good.
Okay, well, of course, glad enough. Get rid of copies.
Mhm.
He came back the next morning at 8 or 9 o'clock. First thing in the morning, he said, "I read the whole thing during the night."
Good.
And he
Wow.
said, "Now I know why I left the Liberal Party."
Wow.
Yes.
Trudeau's
Absolutely.
Liberal Party.
Yeah.
True.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I left
Why
Trudeau's
why
Liberal
I
Party.
left,
Mhm.
Trudeau's Liberal Party.
And why did he leave it?
Well, because he realized also that Trudeau was not a genuine liberal.
He wasn't. He never was.
What
No,
was
he
he?
was not.
What was
he
he?
never was.
What was he?
Well, I call him left of liberal.
Yes,
That's
right.
nice diplomatic way of putting. Basically, a socialist
Yes.
and a radical socialist.
Yes.
Yes,
Radical.
that's
He
right.
might have- That's
Exactly.
why he never joined the NDP. He joined the NDP for 2 reasons. I mean, never joined the NDP for
No.
2 reasons. One, he realized that the NDP would never get anywhere.
No.
Would never become a majority party.
No.
And secondly, that was too moderate for him.
Oh, yeah.
The NDP is a social democratic party.
Yeah.
Trudeau was a democratic socialist.
Yeah.
You see, he was much
Wow.
more radical.
Right. Wow.
And what is interesting,
read that book.
this is fascinating.
Mhm.
This is really fascinating, because broadband and
Yeah.
broadband,
And
Yeah.
broadband, yeah.
in its disillusionment with not getting elected and the liberals, you know, stealing some of the agendas and Canada remaining liberal, he wrote a book about prophesying the title of the book is The End of Equality.
Yeah.
The End of Equality.
Yeah.
Now guess what? Equality has now become the overriding ideology in Canada. You know, equalitarianism,
Yes, yeah.
same-sex marriages,
Yeah,
you know, whatever.
yeah.
So it's ironic that Ed Broadbent thought that was the end
Interesting.
of, you know, the champion of equality, and Trudeau has championed radical equality not only in the economic realm, political and economic, but in the cultural, in the religious,
Yes.
same-sex
Yeah,
unions.
yeah.
That's a radical
Yeah,
agenda of
yeah,
equality.
yeah.
So,
My.
yeah.
So that's Trudeau's Canada, Truth or Consequences.
Yes.
And you're very honest, and you're also very complimentary about things that are good, but
True,
you
true,
give a
no.
very balanced.
Yeah,
He's yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He also
Yeah.
gives credit
no,
to
I
every
um,
vantage point.
had, you know, I
You
had
praise him for his brilliance. We don't agree with what he
Yeah,
did. He's
you
just
know,
brilliant.
I was
I
Christian
don't
and
even-
conservative, but I was not that partisan. You know what I mean?
No.
I did it more objective as an intellectual, if I may use that word. You know, as an objective observer.
Yeah.
I felt bad as an author to start working for a political party. That was never my intent.
No.
But I needed a job, so what do you do? It was offered to me, so I had.
But you weren't
wonderful
working for the party. You were working for a member of parliament.
True, I worked for member
Yeah.
of parliament,
Yeah.
and you know I was very privileged.
Where do you live now?
Where do I live now?
Yeah.
Very good.
In Michigan,
Grand
Very good.
Rapids.
Yeah, we get
Grand Rapids.
Grand Rapids, Michigan.
We got to send Michael to see him.
Well, I'm sorry, Michael
wanna go
missed him
see
by a
him.
few days. I know.
Who's that, Michael? Who?
Michael is on his way, maybe
Her
to the
nephew.
Laurentian leaders, my cousin's
He's
son.
brilliant.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he has such an incredible comprehension of all the
Okay. Well,
structural things.
And what's happening in the world.
Where it's going, and he's amazing.
Okay.
He's just amazing. You got.
He could be a future prime minister.
Oh yeah, totally. He has total comprehension, more than anyone I have ever spoken to.
wow, wonderful. And you're very,
He's
very,
young.
very insightful, and you are
He
very
is,
insightful and
yeah.
very observant.
She is. You are.
Yes, he is,
And
he
she's
is.
a prayer warrior. Okay, what
no
about
problem.
your book on communism? Tell Eileen. I want Dave to hear too, but your coming century of communism, not communism. That's the old narrative. Now the new vision.
Yeah.
And he wrote this 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Communism, this globalist thing.
Come on.
Common.
I
Not
understand.
communism with a
Yeah,
U,
yeah.
but
Yeah,
because
I
everything in common, you know, the
Of course.
idea.
Yeah,
you know,
of course.
the earth belongs as the commons, you know, whatever, there's global commons, whatever.
Yeah, of course.
I began to realize that it's no longer a battle between communism, the old atheist
No.
communism, or liberalism, capitalism, but that there was a new third way, a new ideology developing, a globalism.
Oh yeah.
That's what I mean, and a
That's-
global governance.
Yes, of course.
So I wrote about
That's
that.
so
like, yeah.
totally what Trudeau
Yes.
did too.
And Trudeau, as a matter of fact, the Canadian government,
Yes, very much.
and funded it in
Yeah.
many respects.
Right. Yeah.
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 So yeah, I have.
And you see everything they are doing is
Yeah, absolutely.
towards that
That's right.
that progression. Yeah,
Yes.
always. Yeah.
It's interesting, you know, about equality. The charter already, I immediately picked up on it.
Mhm.
The Canadian charter talks about equality in a twofold sentence
Oh.
idea. It talks about equality, legal equality.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the equality under law, we call that, the rule of law, equality,
Yeah.
you know, public justice, equality
Of
of
course,
law. But then also has an additional, the right to equality in all other spheres of life.
Huh.
So in other words,
Yeah.
it went beyond
Oh,
the liberal parliamentary
Of
democratic
course.
idea of equality under law.
yes.
Now they want to promote equality outside of law
So
in the private sector.
just negate everything else. Here we are.
Yeah.
Oh.
As a matter of fact, I saw that
Yeah.
and I predicted it, and I talked about
Never.
you have really in mind Trudeau already before the charter. I said he really has in mind an agenda
Yes. Yes.
for social equality,
Yes.
economic equality, which was the NDP,
Of course.
Yeah.
you know, and the social equality that was the welfare state, you might say. But I realized that he wanted to go beyond it.
Oh yeah.
I never in my imagination could have dreamt that he would advance.